If you made it to part 4 of the Great Lock-In, we've already talked about you. We've talked about becoming your #1 fan. We've talked about locking into yourself. We've talked about your business, the career, the passion, your money, your future, and actually building the life you've been saying you want. But now we have to talk about something that can either make all of this easier or make it 10 times harder than what it has to be. And that's your relationships. Because you can have the perfect morning routine. You can have the vision board, the business plan. You can know exactly who you're becoming. But if you're constantly surrounded by relationships that pull you back into the older version of yourself, eventually you're going to feel like you're trying to run forward while somebody is holding onto the back of your shirt. And that's why for part 4, it's about to be long. I'm not going to lie to you. You might want to get your pen, paper, your snacks, your teas, whatever concoctions you need to get through this, because I really want you to hear me. If you are ready, hop in, babes. We're locking in. See, part 4 is about curating your relationships around the life you're trying to create, because everybody you love does not necessarily belong in every room you're walking into. Everybody you have history with does not automatically deserve unlimited access to your future. And everyone who isn't growing in the same direction as you isn't necessarily a bad person. Sometimes they're just no longer your person for that particular season. The reason why relationships are so important is because relationships are a part of your environment. One of the biggest things I've realized is that when people talk about changing their environment, they immediately think about moving to different cities, changing apartments, jobs, or even a gym. But your environment isn't just where you lay your head at. Your environment is also who has access to you. I'm gonna say that again. Y'all might wanna, get your pen and paper, write that one down. Your environment is also who has access to you. Who do you talk to every day? Who gets your ideas before they're fully developed? Who do you call on when something goes wrong? Who do you celebrate with when something goes right? Whose opinion can change your mood? Now, whose opinion can make you second guess something you were completely confident about 5 minutes ago? That is your environment too. And when you're locking in, you have to start asking, does my environment reinforce the person I'm becoming, or does it constantly remind me of the person I'm trying to leave behind? Because relationships create patterns. Maybe every time you talk to a certain friend, you're gossiping. Or maybe every time you're around a certain group of people, you're spending money you didn't plan on spending. Maybe, just maybe, every time you talk about your business with someone, they immediately start listing everything that can go wrong. Maybe every time you're excited about something, someone finds a way to humble you. Or maybe there's somebody you love, but every interaction with them turns into an emotional emergency. And now that energy that was supposed to go towards your life is constantly going towards managing the relationship. That is a distraction. Yeah, you heard me. A distraction. And while we're talking about distractions, let's talk about it. Yeah, no, let's talk about this. Because not every distraction looks like a distraction. This is very important because when you hear the word distraction, we think about partying, going out too much, being on your phone, scrolling on TikTok, or procrastinating. But sometimes your biggest distraction is a person. And because you love them, you don't want to call it a distraction. You call it loyalty or call it being understanding. You call it sometimes that's just how we are, right? Exactly. Now, where my empaths at, you can probably be calling it, that's just me being there for someone. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're spending hours recovering emotionally from these emotional exchanges. Because a distracting relationship doesn't necessarily mean somebody is intentionally trying to sabotage you. Sometimes they simply require more from you than you can afford to give during the season. And when I say afford, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about your attention, mental bandwidth, emotional capacity, and your time. Those are currencies too, especially attention. And when you're building something, you have to become very intentional about where you're spending them. So here's something I think everybody should do during their great lock-in. Put your relationships through a filter, not a judgment, a filter. And the first question is, who am I after spending time with this person? Not do I love them or how long we've known each other. Not did they help me when I was going through something 5 years ago. Who are you now after interacting with them? Do you feel inspired or peaceful, or do you feel like yourself? Do you feel supported? Do you feel energized? Or do you leave feeling anxious, insecure, confused, drained, distracted, competitive? Like you suddenly need to prove something. Pay attention to that, because sometimes your body recognizes a relationship dynamic before your mind is willing to admit it. The second question, can this person handle my growth? Because everybody can love you when you're familiar. The real test is what happens when you change. See, what happens when you're busier? What happens when your standards increase? What happens when you're making money? Can you talk about it with them? What happens when you're getting more attention? What happens when you're happier? When you stop participating in habits that used to bond you, what happens? Can the relationship evolve? Because sometimes sometimes people aren't attached to you, they're attached to the version of you. And when you stop being that version, suddenly there's tension. See, listen, you don't have to cut everybody off. And I really want to say this because I feel like social media has really made personal growth sound like new year, new me, everybody's cut off. No, that's not maturity either. Sometimes somebody doesn't need to be removed from your life. They just need a different level of access. Maybe somebody goes from being your everyday friend to somebody you see once a month. Maybe somebody is amazing to go shopping with, but you don't discuss your business with them. Maybe somebody is family, so you're not removing them, right? But you're no longer explaining every decision you're making. Or you love somebody, but you realize they're not the person you can call on when you're emotionally vulnerable. That's okay. Every relationship does not need to fulfill every role. I think sometimes we ruin a perfectly fine relationship because we're trying to force people into a position they were never qualified to hold. Somebody can be a great brunch friend and a terrible business advisor. Some people can be amazing family members and not understanding your career. Just like somebody can love you deeply and still not have the emotional capacity to guide you through certain situations. Stop demanding that everybody become everything. Instead, put people in the correct seat. Your front row should be expensive. And when I say expensive, I don't mean financially. I mean the closer somebody gets to you, the higher your standards should become. Because your front row gets access to things the rest of the room doesn't. I'm gonna say that again. They get access to your fears, your ideas, the plans that God given you. Well, if He allows that, please have discernment. Your celebrations, your vulnerable moments, the disappointments, the unfinished thoughts. So why would the qualifications of your inner circle be lower than the qualifications for anything else important in your life? Your front row should be filled with people who have demonstrated that they can handle access to you, not just people you've known the longest. History is not the same as compatibility. Now let's talk about romantic relationships during the lock-in. And yes, we have to talk about it because the person you're dating can become the greatest addiction to your life or one of the greatest distractions from it. And I don't believe relationships should require you to abandon yourself in order to maintain it. Your relationships should have enough room for you to still have goals. Your routines, your friendships have ambition and still have interests that have absolutely nothing to do with your partner. Because love should add another dimension to your life. It shouldn't become your entire identity. And one of the things I would pay attention to is, does this relationship make it easier or harder for me to be the person I say I want to become? And I'm not saying this because your partner is not responsible for your success. They're not. The relationship shouldn't require constant chaos either. You shouldn't constantly be recovering from arguments, constantly checking someone's phone, wondering where you stand in their head, trying to convince somebody to treat you correctly, or constantly losing sleep. You should not be constantly abandoning your routine because there's another crisis. At some point, you have to realize confusion takes energy, and that's the energy you could be using elsewhere. The right relationship doesn't mean you'll never disagree. It means disagreements don't constantly destroy your foundation. You can communicate, you can express emotions, you can find solutions. Most importantly, repair. It's very important that you can continue to be yourself inside of the relationship. Now let's get into friendships during the lock-in. Friendships deserve the same level of intentionality. I want friends who can celebrate things they haven't experienced yet. That's important to me because that's an abundance mindset. Your friend getting something doesn't mean there's less available for you. Your friend becoming successful doesn't mean you're failing. Your friend entering a relationship doesn't mean you're behind. Your friend becoming more beautiful, confident, connected, wealthy, or successful does not take anything away from you. The friendships I want around me are friendships where we can genuinely say, if it happened for you, that means it's possible. I want friendships where people can express their emotions without making their emotions everybody else's responsibility. You can say that hurt my feelings, or like, I didn't like that. You can even express I feel left out, but then we're also open to finding solutions because communication without resolution can eventually become a cycle, and we don't have time for that in a great lock-in. I'm not interested in friendships where we're constantly having the exact same conflict in a different outfit. We're supposed to learn from each other. We're supposed to grow. Stop confusing access with love. One of the hardest lessons in a relationship is realizing that you can love somebody and still change their access to you. You can love someone and stop telling them everything. You can love someone and stop answering every phone call. You can love someone and stop allowing their emergencies to become your emergencies. You can love someone and realize that your lives are going in different directions. Distance doesn't always mean hatred. Sometimes distance means discernment. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a relationship is to stop forcing it to exist in a a form that it has already outgrown. Now, here's the part that people tend to forget: adding people. The great lock-in isn't only about removing. If all you're doing is cutting people off and isolating yourself and calling that growth, eventually you're going to create an empty room. We also need to talk about adding relationships, because the next version of you may need people you haven't met yet. You might need friends who are building businesses. You might need friends who travel. You might need people who prioritize their health, or you might need creative friends. You might need financially responsible friends. You might need people who introduce you to conversations you've never had before, or people who know things that you don't know. And here's the most important part: you cannot meet everybody you're supposed to meet while constantly hiding inside of the relationships you've already outgrown. Sometimes you have to make room. Go to the event, join the community, take the class, accept the invitation, start the conversation, go somewhere alone, introduce yourself, be willing to be the new person. Because networking isn't just a business concept. Your entire life has a network. And also, while we're talking about networking, don't only look for people who can do something for you. When you're adding relationships, don't turn it into, what can this person do for me? That's transactional. Instead, ask, can we expand each other's lives? Maybe they teach you something and you teach them something. Maybe you introduce them into a new perspective and you encourage each other. Maybe you're just meant to have fun together. Fun matters too. Every friendship doesn't need to become a mastermind. The goal isn't to turn your life into a corporation. The goal is to build an environment where the different parts of you are allowed to thrive. Another thing, your relationship should not compete with your purpose. This might be the biggest point of this entire video, because your relationships should not constantly require you to choose between them and yourself. A healthy relationship can coexist with your ambition. A healthy partner can celebrate your success. The people who belong in your life don't have to understand every dream you have, but they should respect the fact that it matters to you. That is enough. See, you don't need everybody around you to see the vision. You just need them to not constantly stand in front of it. This is the 3 relationship categories I want you to look at. Number 1, remove. These are the relationships that repeatedly disrespect you, destabilize you, sabotage you, violate your boundaries, or require you to betray yourself to maintain them. You don't need a dramatic announcement. Sometimes you simply stop participating. Number 2, reposition. These are the people you genuinely care about, but they need a different seat, whether it's less access, different conversations, different expectations, and different frequencies. The relationship isn't bad, it simply needs boundaries. Number 3, reinforce. These are the relationships that are good, and sometimes we're so focused on removing negative people that we forget to pour into the amazing people already around us. Call them, celebrate them, show up for them, tell them you appreciate them, reciprocate, because high quality relationships require maintenance too. And I would actually like to add a 4th category: receive. Be open to meeting people you haven't met before. Your future best friend, future business partner, or future mentor might not be in your life yet. The person who introduces you to an entirely different world might not know your name yet. Don't become so obsessed with protecting your energy that nobody new can get through the door. Discernment is not isolation. I'm gonna say that one more time. Discernment is not isolation. The great lock-in was never about hiding. And that's really where I would like to end this entire series, because the great lock-in might sound like disappearing, but that's never what I meant. The great lock-in is about becoming so intentional with yourself that your life stops being controlled by whatever happens around you. Part 1 was the decision. Part 2 was self-love. Part 3 was business. And part 4 is relationship. Once you actually like the person you are, once you know what you're building, you become much better at deciding who gets access to it. And that's the real lock-in. It's not, I don't need nobody. It's, I no longer need everybody. There's a difference. I want love, friendship, community, collaboration, and family. I want connection, but I want those things without losing myself inside of them. I want relationships that complement the life I'm building instead of constantly distracting me from building it. And I want to be that kind of person in other people's lives too. Because this isn't only about asking, are they good for me? You also have to ask, am I good for them too? Do I celebrate them? Do I respect their boundaries? Do I allow them to evolve? Do I support their goals? Do I give them the same freedom to grow that I'm asking them to give me? Because the great lock-in has never been about controlling everybody around. It's about taking responsibility for your choices, standards, habits, business, relationships, your life. And once you become intentional about all 4, you don't have to chase the next life. You start building it. So if you're entering the great lock-in, remember, protect the vision, pour into yourself, build the business, and curate the relationships. And then get in, ladies, we're locking in. Remember, darlings, in order to live a high quality lifestyle, you have to embody high quality essence. Smooches!
Yeah.